Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author, Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Louisa Luna. Louisa is the author of several books, including the Alice Vega series. She received the 2023 Sue Grafton Memorial Award for her novel Hideout. She was born and raised in San Francisco and lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and daughter. Her new novel is Tell Me Who You Are, which I gobbled up, and I read a quote from on Monday. If you missed it, go listen. Actually, I think it was Tuesday. My Monday quotes are often a day behind. So thank you for joining me, Louisa. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Tell our listeners about Tell Me Who You Are.
Okay. Tell Me Who You Are is about Dr. Caroline Strange. She is a psychiatrist in Brooklyn, New York. She is certain she knows what's best for everybody, patients, family, the world at large. She is a little cynical. She is a little spiky, but she's also brilliant. So, however, all of this is tested when a new patient comes in to her office and makes a pair of confessions. One is that he is planning to kill someone, and the other is that he knows who Dr. Caroline really is. So from there, we alternate between 3 narrators total, all putting together sort of pieces of a mystery in the past, a mystery in the present, and sort of the puzzle of who Dr. Caroline is.
Yes.
So I hope that I've achieved the levels of suspense on all of those going all the way through. That's the goal. That's the goal.
Exactly. I think, you have for sure. And I think we can say, without giving anything away, that a woman is kidnapped right at the beginning. And then the police are, basically linking this woman to Dr. Caroline. She has there's no physical proof of this man who came and confessed that he was going to kill somebody, right? So she is sort of in the hot spot. And as you said, since she knows what's best for everyone and she's in control of her situation, this is a very uncomfortable feeling for her.
Yes.
and she gets, frustrated, which makes sense, of course, if you're wrongly accused. But also, the way she deals with her frustration is can make her look a little bit more guilty, which is, super fun. And her dynamic with her husband and her other patients, she has nicknames for all of her patients, like, which I thought was so funny. So it's sort of, the book is based on a disorder, and I wondered, you want to talk about it a little bit and sort of how you did your research. It sounds like that was the inspiration for the story.
A little bit, so just to, say in advance, I do research more for inspiration than for nuts and bolts facts. This has gotten me into trouble sometimes because I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But for this, I just tried to, I was focusing on dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. I, Louisa, am no expert. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not, a scholar of that disorder or any other, but sort of embodying Dr. Caroline, I tried to think about how she would view such a disorder, how she would view sort of the data that has amassed over it and the different opinions about it over the years. So, in that regard, so I was consuming sort of the research sort of as her or as she would. Again, I am not an expert on this condition, and I don't per se have an opinion about it because I've had no direct experience with it.
Sure.
But Yes. So I read some material, and then I also watched, just watched a documentary. And again, this was all just sort of more of a gathering of inspiration and like how she would view this. But it was fun to do. And again, this is not necessarily a spoiler. I think you could figure out what her opinion of this sort of thing would be. She she doesn't really believe that the disorder exists. So that certainly takes a few plot turns. That certainly, makes the plot steer in certain directions.
Yeah. Well,
again, I don't want to give too much away.
No, of course. So it sounds like Dr. Caroline is really, so I guess I'm getting at is sort of, where did the story start for you? Was it, was it with the character, or was it with the idea of this, and you said, as you said, the disorder is very controversial, right? There's a whole, the industry, and I'm not an expert either, but the industry is very split on whether or not this is a real thing, or if it's just something that is, spoon fed to people who have had trauma, or manufactured to get away with things or whatever. But for you, I'm wondering, like, where did this story kind of come from?
It really emerged from Dr. Caroline's voice.
Mm-hmm.
I had an idea of a voice I wanted to kind of embody, and so I just started playing around with that. And I knew I wanted to, all of those things that I said in my opener here about her being cynical and thinking she knows what's best for everyone and brilliant. I wanted that all to come out. In actual, but as you know, you have a vision of certain things, and then as it starts coming out, like, you get other things. It may not fit exactly what you had in mind, which is part of the reason we love it. But as I was writing her, I just kind of got more and more insight into like who she was and like what was making her tick. And she really, I did have an idea of what I wanted to happen at the end. I had no idea how I was going to get there, you know? And so I knew I wanted to play around with the multi-narrator format. But she, I think, is the driving force out of the three narrators that I have. But I feel like, but I feel like she really sets the tone for the whole story and the whole trajectory of the story. I hope that answers that. I don't know if it does.
No, it totally does. And I think, so the half of the book is set in the past of something that happened to Dr. Caroline when she was young. But one of the things I think is interesting, and I kind of want to explore, because of course this is Killer Women, is, the way in which Caroline addresses the world isn't sort of atypical for a woman who is raising children and has a very demanding professional career. Like, the idea that she keeps everything so, in its place, in its line, is sort of the way women have to be to manage all the different things that she kind of has to handle it. Like, everybody has to stay in their lane. Everybody has to do things the way that I want them done. Because otherwise, how could I possibly balance, 2 children with a husband who's, an artist, and so probably not super like organized. And I feel like that was so, like, I see parts of me in Dr. Caroline, right? That's so.
Sorry, you go.
No, so speak to that. I was kind of just curious to know if that's, if that came to you.
Absolutely.
Or
Well, as I was writing it, it did, because if someone has all of these aspects of her personality, she's going to control everything. It has to be this way, right? However, what was fun is that as I was writing the character of Ellen, who is the kidnapped woman, I found that there was this wonderful through line between these two women, right? Of being an imperfect mother, of being a wife, of trying to work, of, all of these pieces. And I found that they had so much more in common, than I ever would have thought starting the piece. I didn't even know who Ellen was. She was just a woman in a locked room. I didn't know anything about her. And then as I started to flesh her out a little bit, I was like, wow, like, this is like a lot going on with what it means to be a woman now,
Right. Right.
and trying to juggle all those things. And,
Right.
Ellen really views in one way, they really are two sides of the same coin. Like Dr. Caroline thinks she's doing everything great,
Right.
for better or for worse.
Right.
And Ellen just sees flaws in herself
Right.
everywhere, and so I do feel like they really complement each other and really tell that story of trying to keep it all together.
Yeah.
And this book takes place, I should say, right after, not like in 2021. So it's like a year after the deepest, darkest
pandemic.
COVID.
Yes, right.
But it's still in the DNA everywhere, and so you've got the mom who's trying to just keep everyone together, and it's very hard.
And it feels like first of all, it feels so universal because I think every mother has been both Caroline and Ellen, right? We've all had the moments where we're like, I got this, I got it all, this is gonna be fine. And the moments where we're like, and I feel like if you took one piece away from Dr. Caroline, she'd be Ellen. You know what I mean? Just like one little, and at the end of the book, as things progress, and no spoilers, but as things progress, I think you do see her sort of edging closer to Ellen actually edges closer to Caroline, which I thought was really interesting, right? Put into positions, we all have these attributes, but it is sort of like Caroline's character I really loved because I feel like she does that thing that so many of us do, where we just like, we're sort of convinced, it's like a little bit of brainwashing, that we are like, everything is great. And you can just sense that it's all sort of balancing, like on some like really tall stick and about to go.
It's Jenga. It's like the Jenga of mother. It's the Jenga of motherhood. So everything is just like, or the Jenga of life, and one little thing, one little brick out of place.
Right. And it's interesting too that both of their husbands are allowed to be a little bit messier, right? I mean, Ellen is divorced recently, or divorcing. I can't remember if it's final. And then, Caroline's husband is just an artist, but they have this much more, and again, this is, these are fun. The characters are very individualized. We're not talking about broad stereotypes, but there is a sense that all the men in the book have sort of easier, like, this is the way my life is. And they kind of go with it until, something goes wrong with them. Versus the women are sort of more uptight until something breaks them. So it's kind of, they're on opposite sides, which I really enjoyed watching the Jenga, the little pieces come out. And then eventually, of course, the whole, everything.
Yeah.
And of course, Caroline's also very much a product of her parents, which I always think is really interesting too, right? I mean, she's an only child. I think only children are fascinating, right? Because you don't have anybody to sort of say, is mom acting crazy or is it me? There's nobody to bounce your parents against. And she's quite a clever, young girl. And, her parents are, doing the best they can, I'm sure. But, as all parents do, they're missing some.
Not without their flaws. We can say that diplomatically.
Not without their flaws.
Yes, and yes, to again to edge away. I'm going to speak precisely to edge away from spoilers, but you do get to see a younger version of Caroline in the book. And I also loved doing that because when I'm reading, I love seeing like the narrator or the main character from someone else's point of view, because you feel like you have this totally separate, third party view.
Right. And I love that. It was the dad, it was the dad, the father of her friend who lived next door neighbors. And I agree, because you do see, and it makes total sense that Caroline is who Caroline is now, because she's a very precocious, very smart, young girl. So of course she grows into, to be, and like you said, she even as a young kid, she's really kind of got all her, ducks in a row, and she's way smarter than we expect her to be, or than people expect of her. So she, she's able to sort of understand things beyond what people think she's understanding. She's very clever. So it is super fun. And there is that sense of the sort of like the era of those kids growing up, right? It's
Good.
really
Yeah. I'm glad it came through.
yeah.
Because it's just, you're talking about pre-social media is just a totally different landscape. And that doesn't mean, when I say that, like, I don't mean it was like, oh, such an innocent time. Like, it wasn't really.
No.
If you're a 13-year-old girl, it's never an innocent
Right.
time. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, there's
Right.
never, it just, the threats are in different places coming from different things. Social media, they might be a little more forward. They might be a little more in your face, literally, as opposed to lurking,
Right. No, I think that's right. And I think it's but on the flip side, the sort of feels like in some ways those the predators that we didn't call them predators back then. We just called them creepy people
creeps
creeps or whatever. Those people were sort of in your physical space in a way that now a lot of stuff happens across the screen, which in some ways is scarier, but in some ways feels kind of less scary, right? They're not able to reach out and grab you. So I did, and I love that, Ellen has this thought that I quoted on when I did the reading on Tuesday about just that moment when she found out she was pregnant and wishing she was having a boy, because there is something to that. And I, of course, I felt, when I have one of each, but I do remember thinking, oh God, right? There's so much more, such different. I mean, I didn't grow up as a boy, so I can't speak to the pressures that they have, but it did feel like, oh, there's just so much more vulnerability and fear that go. And I was raised, completely differently than my brothers, right? I mean, there's this, there's this other like, yeah, you guys are fine. No, you can't go there, and there's that sort of idea. So I love the nuance of that, because I think it's also kind of interesting. Like, I think there's something sort of like, when the women really confess how we feel about things like that, right? Like when we say, oh God, I wish I'd had a boy, there's this part of us that feels like it's so shameful to say that, right?
You can't have that. Right. And I mean, when Ellen says that she sort of doesn't have anything to lose. So she's sort of at the
kidnapped
point where she may not have even aired that truth to herself, but at that point in her life. And and it all falls under does this make me a bad mother? Like, am I a bad mother? And all of that. Can I even question these things, or to air these things, or talk about these things? And if I were her therapist, I would be like, just not to your kid, but other than that, you're allowed to have thoughts and feelings.
Right. And she has the same, which we all have, the moments when you just like, why does my child never stop talking? How can I lock myself in the bathroom for 20 minutes and just have 20 minutes of peace? And she's very human, and it makes her really, I mean, it makes us love her, and not to mention the position she's in. So that is so fun. So it doesn't sound like you're an outliner. You are not like, oh, this happens and this happens. No, me neither.
No, and I recently listened to your podcast with B.A. Paris, and she was saying similarly, at some points it would be great to be an outliner,
I know.
Because you get yourself tied up into all kinds of knots. I mean, this is just the only way I can do it. That said, it's sort of, I think it was E.L. Doctor who originally said it about writing a novel like, driving with headlights in the fog. Like, you can see a little bit ahead.
Right.
I do that, just make it to the next scene. But I do, when I say, all right, this is the net destination, that's where I want to get, so I'm trying to fill in that space between here and there. But also, because we do character driven stuff, you want to allow for characters to do some crazy stuff or whatever, wherever they guide you or lead you.
It's the question of like, what would she do now, right? I mean, that's the difference between what should happen now, which is your plot driven book, versus like what and like when there's moments when like Caroline just does not listen to what the police tell her because it's not who she is, right? She's like, you guys, you guys are not doing this right or fast enough, and so I'm going to do it on my own. And that is, I think, because like you said, like another story, you know, it wouldn't have worked that way. Although obviously for the sake of suspense, we need her to also just, you know, be out on her own, disregarding police advice and everything else. But it was fun because I felt like the things she did, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see her doing that, right? And even her husband's like, are you coming home? You know, when did you think you'd be home? Yeah, there's a situation.
Right. And she's like, relax, I got it. Even if she doesn't have it, she will always think she does. That's her thing. That's her thing.
And I love that he calls her doctor. He calls his wife doctor, you know.
Yep.
And except
the
for
whole family calls her doctor.
One point he uses her name and then she sort of knows he's really freaking out. Which I thought was so on the nose. All those little, I think sometimes it's the little details of things that really just, to me, add up to such a, you know, full painting of something. And so you do a beautiful job of that. So
thank you so much. I'm so glad it came across that way. And you know, something should be said for poor Gordon, the third narrator.
Yeah.
But again, we in order to avoid spoilers, he was the only one I've kind of ever written that I had to keep him kind of on a tight leash in terms of plot. He served other plot points.
Yeah.
But that said, I tried to have some fun doing that. And when I say fun, I mean as much fun as you can have writing about someone who may be mentally unstable a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, but actually, like, and again, we're talking about that generation of men, right? So this is, you know, whatever it is, 30 years ago, or 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And she, you know, and he has just been laid off, right? He works at a brewery, right? And, you know, and he's just been laid off, and you can imagine, and then he gets on the phone with his dad, who is such a total jerk to him, right? And there's all this like, oh, you are, you know, you're never going to amount to something. There's all those voices that he gets and makes the situation worse. So, and again, I think it's a very typical, a lot of relationships between men are still like that, right? It's still, there's no nuance about, you know, well, that must be tough for you, or how do you feel about it? It's just, so I actually thought Gordon was, you know, I mean, he was also endearing in a way that, you know, I mean, I'm glad I don't live with him, but, you know,
you do feel for him. Yeah.
Of course. And then sort of, you know, the idea that the relationship, the marriage was also that era where they didn't have real conversations about, you know, what was going on and how to support one another, you know, any of it. I mean, it just didn't have any of that.
Yeah. It didn't
so
happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it did, but in this setting with these characters, there was not a lot of communication about emotions or feeling, you know, less than or anything like that, you know.
Right. And I think that was, I think it fits with the era that we're, you know, it probably still fits, but I think it for sure fit with the you know, that era and that family. And no, I appreciate Gordon, and I think he also, the three characters are it's fun to read a book where the three characters feel really different. You know what I mean? You definitely know when you're in each point of view, and, you know, and where you are. And anyway, it was, I thought, very well done. And it's nice to have a male character, right? I mean, it's nice to have that perspective.
Yes. And yes. And as doing from the other side of the laptop, it's a lot of fun to sit down one day and write one voice, and then sit down another and write another voice. And that feels like, okay, if one is feeling a little tortured, you know, or a little bit, like, I can't get anywhere right now, I'm going to switch to the other one. And that's really helpful. That was really, and I'd never done that before. So it was really,
oh, really? This is new for you.
This is, you know, the Alice Vega books are, I'm going to say, like, close third person. And so I go between Vega and Cap, but it's, in terms of the diction and like the structure of the prose, it's all pretty much the same.
Got it.
So even though you're seeing certain things from each of their points of view, it's still not first person.
Yeah.
So to have the three narrators first person on each, it's really, really a lot of fun. Whole lot of fun.
It's different. So how about your other book? There's another, I'm going to the one that you won. Oh, Hideout. Is that a Vega
Yeah.
book? Okay.
That's the third. Yes, that's the third and most recent Vega book. So yeah, that was a hard one to do just because it was sort of during COVID.
Yeah.
And it was just, I have a friend who's a friend who's a writer who said, like, the only people I know, who are writing, who are getting writing done were people on contract. It might be true.
I mean, right.
You know what I mean? Like, because you had to, like, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Because it's like,
so
we had our
hard.
children home. Everything was different.
Oh, it's chaos.
Yeah. Especially, I think, for people like living in a city like yours, where I was much more tensely locked down and you have much less space. I mean, right?
Yeah.
You can't, there's not like escaping to your own wing of the house.
Right.
It's
right.
each other's. Yeah. I can imagine. No, that was a horrible time to write. And it was funny because it felt like, why is it so hard? This is what we do all the time. We sit in a room alone.
Right.
We just,
but it was different.
Just, it was different. Yeah. The mental
and again,
toll.
I certainly am on the lucky side of this equation.
Of course.
We were safe. We were, all of our family was safe. We were all right here. I didn't lose my day job. I was able to do it remotely. So, but that said, a challenging time to create and like feel creative. That's like the last thing you wanted to do at 11 o'clock at night, after everything.
Right. It's true. I think and I think you, like you said, I think that has been what I've heard from people too. Sort of universally, writers felt, uncreative. Probably the world felt uncreative. Now tell me this. So is this then, is this your first standalone then?
I wrote 3 standalones in my 20s.
Oh, okay.
It was under my name, but a different publisher. And so this is my first standalone in 20 years.
Okay.
So those 3 standalones were very much, books of my youth. I love them, but they're unrecognizable. They're a little unrecognizable to me now, because
exactly.
I'm
you grew up.
Right.
You grew up.
I grew up.
Yeah.
And now what the glorious thing about that is I'm sure you can appreciate, is that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So is that I can now get an idea, right? And if you have an idea, I feel like I've logged enough miles and have the experience and skill that I can actually execute the idea. I don't have to sort of wait to catch up to it, which is a great feeling, and that can only come with writing for as long as we have.
Yeah, I think that is a really valid point. I think that's totally true. And I think I did take on things I probably shouldn't have or couldn't quite get my head around when I was younger. And it feels, or maybe also my sort of ideas are more tailored to where I am in life too, which helps. In your 20s, you're like, oh, the big idea, and it's, it might be big, but it's probably not right for you, kind of thing. So can you tell us a little about what you're working on? Are you working on a new project?
I am, but like I'm not anywhere near done. But it's something different again. I mean, look, anything I write is going to have a thriller element, a mystery element. Like I'm never going to not write that. But it's just something a little different. I am having more fun.
Good.
But at the same time, there's a huge element of like every day, like, what am I doing? Like, where's this going? What am I doing?
Right.
That's part of it. Like, you do it long enough. And I hate to say trust the process, because I kind of don't. Because I feel like that happens, that's implying that, like, you don't even have to think about it. Like, it's just going to all work out. No, that's not the case at all. I almost feel like it's both. You have to trust that you've done it and you can do it again, but you also have to know it's going to be totally different. It's going to feel totally unfamiliar and just as terrifying as the very first time. Right. So it's kind of both. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, I'm just trying to find my way through it. It's not it's unlike anything else I've done before. So, and not like, I'm not talking about a huge genre switch. Like, I'm not turning to romance or fantasy or anything like that. That's not quite, that would be like learning a new language. I can't really do that. But I'm doing, but it's a lot of fun. So I'm just seeing where it goes right now.
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, that's the nice thing about, this whole like a book a year thing. It's just, I'm not gonna have a book out this year. And
I mean, I've never turned it out that quickly, so I have hats off to you. It's brutal. It's brutal.
It's brutal. And I did it for a lot of years, and now I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. Like I want to write, I want to write more thoughtful, bigger books in the sense that they go deeper. We learn more about the characters. They're more character based. Right. Because I'm like, that is just, it feels unsustainable to me. And then there's people who write 3 or 4 books a year, and I'm like, I do not get it. But
right,
yeah,
but you don't sleep, yeah.
Right. I mean, do you leave your house ever? Like, do you have a social life? Right. Yeah.
Right.
So for me, but there's something interesting about, I think I had it in my brain that every year, I think it's been since 2013 or so, I have had a book out a year until this year. And now it's like, there's kind of this, like, you fail. So now it kind of takes the pressure off. Like now I'm like, wow, I didn't have one in 2024. So maybe I won't have one in 2026 either, or whatever.
Now the floodgates are open in that direction. Now you can just, I mean, there's a lot to be said for taking your time. Something different will come out, something different than what you've done. It's not better or worse. It's just like, you're going to get a different animal,
And I think,
I find that,
sorry, I interrupted you. I think it will be better. I think having more, I mean, there's the idea that you could tinker between like year 8 and year 10, that maybe you're not making it that much better and you're just making it like, you're just making yourself crazy. But I do think that when you have a little more time, you can be more thoughtful, more organic about and you can walk away from it for a few days and be like, oh, now I kind of understand. Or, you you don't have time to do it if you have to get it done really quickly. So
and there's and it doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing that you take some time. And if you know that you have like some ideas and you have loose deadlines for yourself, to try to pull it together or just get something down. I think it's really valuable. If we could write, it would be great to write this way forever.
I know, that's what
and make a living that way. That would be great.
Well, that's the tricky part, right? The system is definitely geared for people to do it faster.
Churn it out.
But no, I'm going to avoid that. I'm really enjoying it. But I love this. And I love your Chris Pavone quote. This fantastic novel is like going out drinking with your sharpest, sexiest, most dangerous friend and getting into trouble that's both unexpected and inevitable. That's fantastic.
I love it too.
Yeah.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect.
He's a good friend. He's a neat guy, but that's a great quote, and it's very true. Yeah. So I know you're on Instagram. Where else can we find about your books?
That is but Instagram's where I'm the most active. I have an ancient Facebook account that shall not be engaged with unless you want to see, I don't know, a Gen Xer like try to navigate. Yeah.
Understood.
I do have a website, louisaluna.com, but the most current information is on Instagram at Louisa Luna Writer.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we will find you out there. And everyone, we will be giving away a copy of Tell Me Who You Are. So go over to our Facebook page, our antiquated Facebook page, but it's still active. We got lots of fun. We talk about our Killer Women group and enter to win a copy of Louisa's book. It is so fun. Louisa, congratulations.
Thank you.
So fun to talk to you. I love this. And Louisa and I actually turned out we grew up not that far apart, so we got a chance to chat about rival high schools of all things before and I want to go back and talk about some things about the book which nobody else gets to hear. So
yay!
Everybody, this is Killer Women with Louisa Luna, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much.